Well, working our recovery with intentionality is one of the keys to finding lasting change. But there's several things that can keep us from staying in that mindset and that heart space. Today, we're going to talk about some of those things that are barriers to working our recovery with intentionality.
Recovery can be hard, but it's worth it. There is hope knowing we can find healing one step at a time with Jesus and healthy community. Whether you're struggling with a hurt or a hang-up or a habit, you're not alone. During this podcast, we share real stories, practical tools, and powerful truths that inspire you to keep moving forward. No matter where you are on your journey, there's hope ahead. So stick with us as we walk this path together through Celebrate Recovery.
Well, hey, y'all. Welcome to Hope in Recovery, a Fellowship Celebrate Recovery podcast where we talk life change stories and recovery conversations to help keep us moving closer to Jesus on this road of healing and growth through this process of Celebrate Recovery. And excited for our conversation today, as always. Last episode, me and Julia talked a little bit about what does it look like for us to work our recovery with intentionality, and kind of coming out of that. Today I was thinking through what are some barriers that keep us from living with that intentionality? Because I think there's several things that can kind of keep us from that open and moldable place of humility. And there are things that make a lot of sense. And so before we jump into it today, I do just want to say, hey, as always, if you're getting something out of this, please like, subscribe, follow. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we're super glad that you're here. Let me introduce myself. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I struggle with depression, food issues, sexual addiction, and grief. And my name is Andy. I've got the great privilege of being a part of Fellowship Fayetteville Celebrate Recovery, but super grateful to be a part of all of Fellowship Celebrate Recovery here at Fellowship Bible Church in Northwest Arkansas, as we seek to help people find healing and hope through Celebrate Recovery at Fellowship Rogers, Fellowship Bentonville, Fellowship Fayetteville. Love being a part of it and excited for what God is doing. And so if you're listening to this and you're here in the Northwest Arkansas area, man, we would love for you to come be a part of our forever family. Celebrate Recovery meets at Fellowship Rogers and Fellowship Fayetteville every single Friday night, 7 o'clock. We'd love to see you there. So like I said, last week we were talking about just what does it look like for us to live and work our recovery with intentionality. And just even talking about that word intention, what does that word mean? It means a determination to act in a certain way. And over the course of recovery, and I think it's appropriate that even as we're recording this on Friday nights, we're entering into principle 3, which is consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. That conscious choice, that determination to step forward, it comes in principle 3. It doesn't necessarily come right at the beginning of the process. Principle 1 is about us stepping out of denial. It's about us understanding that I'm not God, that there's a God, I'm not it, that I'm powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing, and that my life, under my own strength, under my best thinking, is unmanageable. Which moves us into principle 2 and step 2 with it, which is understanding that there's a power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity, that we can understand, earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, and that he has the power to help me recover. And so we start recovery with the understanding that there's a God and I'm not it, and understanding that this God actually can change me. And now in principle 3, there's this conscious choice, this choice to start living differently, to start leaning into surrendering my life and my will to Christ's care and control. And this, what I love about the principles and the steps is that we don't just work them the first time that we get into Celebrate Recovery, that we get into this process. It's not like I work principle one and it's like, okay, I got it. And then we move on past it. But we learn these principles and these steps, and then we work them concurrently as we live our life moving forward. And so we never move past principle three. And I want to talk about some barriers that keep us from stepping into that intentional surrender that recovery requires. And I think early on, one of the biggest things that kind of, I know, kept me from stepping across that line early on in my recovery is that I hadn't allowed my pain to be great enough. That first barrier. And so what did I mean by that? Oftentimes in Celebrate Recovery, we say that oftentimes we won't change until our pain is greater than our fear of change. And so what that means is it's hard to change if there's not motivation, and oftentimes pain is that really great motivator. And if I'm experiencing enough discomfort in an area of my life, if it's causing enough chaos in my life, that's when I start to seek out change. And that's a pretty common human thing. And so for me, I hadn't allowed my level of pain to be enough yet. And I think there's two ways that we can allow our pain to become greater than our fear of change. One is that I can get really strong-willed and I can experience more and more pain until the level of pain that I've accumulated is enough. And I think about in my struggles with alcohol, that's kind of what I did. Is I finally made the decision to change in that particular area of my life when I woke up one morning with a hangover thinking about the things that I had done. And I had done that plenty of other times, but this time was different. I woke up just thinking, man, this is not the person I want to be anymore. And there was some other things, and it wasn't as clear cut. It's not like the Lord automatically took that desire away at that moment, but there was a marked, sober realization of this really hurts. This is hurting me. This is hurting my future, and I don't want this to continue on. And so there was that. But there's another way for our pain to exceed our fear of change. It's for us to actually acknowledge the pain that has already happened. I don't have to wreck my car for me to realize I'm driving too fast. I can allow myself to go, whew, it seems like I'm going pretty quick, and actually take a good honest look at the speedometer and go, ooh, Lord, I need to let off that accelerator. And so if I refuse to allow myself to go into either of those spaces, if I don't allow myself to feel the pain that has been caused, chances are it's going to keep me from actually stepping forward in a meaningful way because I'm still holding on. I'm not convinced that I need to let this thing go. And so there is that that lack of fear, or that lack of felt pain can be one of those barriers to intention. And I think with it is the lack of desired awareness. The lack of desired awareness. And even as I say that, I don't even know if that's exactly how I would phrase it. But I would think there's a lack of awareness of what's going on in my life. I think about, for me, one of the struggles that I dealt with for years and years and years was just a lot of dysfunction in my finances. I walked into marriage about 9 years ago with a lot of just consumer debt. And I had student loans, I had maxed out credit card, I had, a lot going on there. And I was using my spending as a way for me to cope. But one of the other things that was interesting in that, and I can remember a very specific moment where I was buying something, I was buying groceries at Walmart, and my credit card got declined because I had maxed out. And I had gotten into this habit of, I don't want to look at my bank account. I don't want to look at my checking account because I'm afraid of what it's going to say. So I'm just going to swipe the credit card. And then I swiped the credit card and the credit card wouldn't work. And I felt anxiety in my body opening up my phone, going to my banking app and looking at my checking account. And it was a really clear moment for me of, man, if I am not willing to actually look at this, to actually allow myself to be fully aware of the situation that I'm staring down, then I'm not going to intentionally address this area of my life. And so what does it look like for us to develop awareness? Well, we actually have to look at it. What's the area of my life that is causing me pain? And am I willing to admit that it's actually something that I don't want anymore? Am I willing to look at the problem? Because anything that stays hidden will not go healed. And so what are the things that maybe I'm hiding? And maybe it's a thing where it's like, I'm not hiding this. I know that it's a problem, but I'm not allowing myself to honestly look at the problem and admit that it's a problem. That's a barrier to intention right there. Intention necessarily demands that we give something our focus. And if I'm not willing to focus on it, if I'm just willing just to say, yeah, I know that's in my peripherals, but I'm not gonna look at it and actually focus on it, it's not gonna stay healed. Things don't get healed by accident. They get healed by intentionally bringing God and others into that space. And so we're going to go to a quick break right now, and coming back, I want to talk about maybe some barriers to intention, especially for those of us that maybe have been working our recovery for a while now. Talk about it.
Hey friends, a lot of people find the process of starting recovery scary because they aren't sure how to begin or what to expect. The easiest way to get started is simply to get started. Just take that next right step and go to a CR meeting. Every Friday night, we have our Celebrate Recovery meetings at Fellowship Fayetteville and Fellowship Rogers. At 6 p.m., we have a great meal for connection with other recovery brothers and sisters. Then we meet for large group at 7 p.m., followed by open share groups at 8. Same schedule on both campuses, different teachers, different worship teams, but the same great experience. We'd love for you to join us this Friday night. It's never too late to start or start over again. For more information, go to fellowshipcr.org.
And we're back talking today about barriers to working our recovery with intentionality, working our recovery with a determination to act in a certain way, understanding that it's not my strength that changes me, it's Jesus' strength in me, that as I surrender to it, it changes me. Before the break, we were talking about some common barriers to intentionality that keep us stuck, especially early on in the recovery process. But I want to shift because some of us that have been listening to this have been in recovery for years. And, Julia had talked last time about how there are seasons in our recovery that kind of ebb and flow of our commitment and our intention in it. And I wanted to talk about a couple different things that kind of fall into that category as why it can ebb and flow a little bit more. I think one of those things is circumstance, hard circumstances of life. One of the hardest realities of recovery is that we come into recovery because there's been painful events that have happened that have shaped our stories and our habits. But a necessary truth of living in a broken world is that broken things are going to continue to happen to us. And so I know for me, I got into recovery when I was 23 years old. I'm getting ready to turn 35 here in a couple months. In the last 12 years of my life have contained probably more pain than the first 23. I've experienced more hurt in my life since entering recovery than before. And sometimes those circumstances in life have been moments where they've just kind of zapped my energy and they've zapped my intentionality. Pain has a way of just draining us. And I just being real honest, I saw that in the season of my life when my older brother got cancer. I've seen that in the season of my life as I've watched my dad deal with health issues and things like that. I've watched that happen during COVID. I watched that these circumstances, these outside circumstances that feel like initially, no matter how long I've known Jesus, there can be this thought of, really, God? Why are you doing this? And I think those circumstances that come in, the painful events that happen in our life as we're in recovery, they can have a couple different effects on us. One of them can be that it causes us to question God's goodness, and it can take us out of the game. It can cause us to just go, you know what? There's a lot of pain going on in this world, and you know what? I'm just gonna go back to the way things were before because this isn't worth it. And if you've been in that space, like, you know, it makes sense why we're feeling that. But one of the things we see over and over again in Scripture is the reality that God is always working, no matter the circumstances are big and painful, or whether things are going really, really well. You know, Jesus tells us in the book of John, he says, in this world you will have trouble, which it's like, okay, great. Thanks, Jesus. That's a wonderful promise. Way to go. But that's not the end of his sentence. He says, in this world you will have trouble. He goes on to say, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. Jesus promises us that as we live in this life, broken things are going to happen. But he's not distant in it. Could it be the case that even though God doesn't shield us from the shrapnel of the bombs that are blowing up, could it be the case that he's still right there next to us in the foxhole when it's happening? That sometimes when it gets too close, maybe he does just kind of cover us. And we still hear the bombs going off. We're still in the midst of the battle, but he's right there with us. Think of the book of Romans in chapter 5, where it says that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And so we can allow the painful circumstances of this life to pull us away from the process, or we can allow it to have its intended effect, which is, I think, that it's intended to deepen us. It's intended for God to teach us his grace a little bit more, that it really isn't about our strength, but it really is about him. But it's a real roadblock to our intentionality. And so are the storms that are blowing up in our life, are they taking us off of our focus? Are we focusing on the waves, or are we focusing on the one who's with us in the midst of the waves? That's Jesus. And then I think the last thing I'll mention today is discouragement. And I think this is a really, really big one, discouragement. There was a podcaster and an author named Carey Nieuwhof where he said this phrase that he's convinced that discouragement has taken down more people than moral failure. Discouragement has taken down more people than moral failure. I think one of the biggest tactics of the enemy in our recovery is to get us so discouraged that we don't even want to engage. And that discouragement can happen early on because we're not changing as quickly as we think we need to. I know that was part of my discouragement in the process. But could it be the case that what God says in Philippians 1:6 is true? That he who began a good work in us will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. That God is doing something, that if he started something in us, he's not going to stop. So are we willing to believe that God really is working? But we can get discouraged because things aren't happening as quickly as we thought. We can get discouraged maybe because there's been setbacks in our recovery. Maybe we've encountered relapse. Maybe there were areas that we thought we had found healing in, but maybe God revealed another layer of it. And we're just like, golly, is there more, Lord? Can't I just be fixed? But we can choose to get discouraged, or we can choose to embrace the reality that this is where we're at today. And God is asking me to surrender this part of him, part of me to him today. And then I think a third area of discouragement comes up when there's just more to work on. And I know I was actually talking to a friend of mine last week. There's been an area pop up in my heart where, I am realizing that there's more work that God wants to do in me when it comes to me actually relying on the help of others in my life as I'm going through hard seasons. And I find that there's this resistance in me. And as I was processing with my friend who, was very gracious and, calling these things out in me, one of the things that I said is like, I know what you're saying is so true. But man, it's so funny that there's a part of me that's just like, dang it, this is another area of growth for me. Which I recognized how funny it was that I was saying that in the moment. But that can be we can let it be a discouraging thing, or we can allow it to be evidence of this, that our God is so faithful and good and loving that he's willing to not stop working on us, that he is going to be faithful to carry us on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. And so rather than seeing a new area to change and allowing that to discourage us to the point to where we want to throw in the towel, maybe we could see that new area of change as evidence of God's grace, as evidence of God's love and his goodness in our life. Because I'm convinced that's actually what it is. So, hey, man, I feel like there's so much that could be said in this topic of working our recovery with intentionality and barriers and roadblocks to work in our recovery with intention. And I just want to say this: if you're listening to this and you're in the midst of your recovery process, here's what I would love to encourage you with. Just keep showing up and stay in the process. You don't have to have it all fixed today. You don't have to have all of the answers. You don't have to be perfect and have all the right thinking today. The only thing that we're required of today is to show up and surrender. And so if you can show up and surrender, get to the meeting, show up for yourself, spend time with God, just show up. And then say, God, what do you want me to change? And then ask for his strength to do it today. Those small choices, those small daily decisions, that's what builds lasting recovery. You see, recovery is not marked by one grand gesture. It's marked by 1,000 small surrenders day after day over time. If you can keep taking the right step today, who knows where you're going to be a year from now? We may not be the people that we want to be, but what we'll find is we're not the person we used to be. And that's something worth celebrating. And so if you're here, if you're listening to this, if you're showing up for yourself, good job. Keep taking that next right step, and we're right here with you. And if you need a safe place to keep taking that right step and people around you to encourage you, we'd love to see you on a Friday night. 7 o'clock at Fellowship Fayetteville or Fellowship Rogers, Celebrate Recoveries. We would love to see you there and encourage you and help you know that, man, you're not alone. And in Jesus, healing, hope, and growth in him, it's so possible. We may not be the people we want to be yet, but we don't have to keep being the people that we've been. Love y'all. We'll see you next time.